for its opponents. He was hounded from city to city. Zurich, Paris, Madrid. New York, the heart of capitalism, the last refuge of the Russian revolutionary. It was here in February 1917 that he heard the news he'd been waiting for years. The Tsar had been overthrown. The masses had once more taken to the streets of Petrograd. I was stormed by the New York press. There were thousands of questions from all sides, culminating in, "What now?" "We're on our way," I said. Everyone thought I was joking. Eight months later, the joke had come true, but the new masters had almost insupportable problems to face. The country had been ground down by hunger and war. The Bolsheviki had little support in the huge empire. They had promised to make peace. Now they had to keep this promise at any price. Lenin sent Trotsky as the new foreign minister to the negotiations in Brest-Litovsk. For Trotsky, accepting the harsh conditions laid down by Germany was intolerable. The reluctant foreign minister laid aside all the diplomatic niceties and unilaterally declared the war to be over. 2 days after this spectacular outburst, the coup failed. German troops were on the march again. Trotsky resigned. Finally, the Soviet government did sign the peace treaty on humiliating conditions. At the same time, the old Tsarist high command was summoning up opposition to the Red Republic. They met with support from all over the world. A communist Russia was a horrifying thought.
The Bolsheviks had no choice but to fight it. I think it affected the mentality from then on. You know, the idea that we are a tiny clique of people and the whole world is organized against us, and England and America and our internal enemies are all standing up ready to fight us.
In February 1918, Lenin's government fled to Moscow, the new capital. Its power base was shrinking by the day. There were no longer any borders, only fronts. With their backs to the wall, the Bolsheviks mobilized. Hamlet's words applied: to be or not to be. The result was the idea to form the Red Army, and the one who was to create this army out of nothing was Trotsky. Lenin's mood was black. What we have is a rabble. His faith in our being able to create such an army was not very strong, so I said, build up the troops with iron discipline and competence. All well and good, he said, but we have no time. Trotsky made a bold move. He decided to use the old to build up the new. He hired thousands of out-of-work Tsarist officers. For many Bolshevik activists, it was unacceptable suddenly to have to take orders from Tsarist officers. Within the Bolshevik party, opposition to this policy mounted. Stalin was one of the ringleaders. Stalin's jealousy of Trotsky as commander-in-chief would lead to more and more new conflicts. Criticism of Trotsky grew. The victories didn't happen. The White Guards were advancing on Moscow, inspired by the hope of restoring the Tsar. Pictures of demonstrations to celebrate the birthday of Tsar Nicholas II. For many, still the father of the country. He was under arrest, and Trotsky was planning a show trial to reveal his crimes. But on the 17th of July, the Romanovs were shot in Yekaterinburg. Trotsky was at the front when he heard the news and defended Lenin's decision. The execution of the imperial family was necessary, not just to strike fear into the enemy, but also to shake up our own ranks. We are heading either for total victory or total defeat. In the late summer of 1918, the Bolsheviks seemed to have lost the civil war. Trotsky rushed from front to front in his armoured train. This rolling fortress became a legend. Wherever Trotsky turned up in it, almost, the situation changed. The head of the Red Army was everywhere, motivating, stimulating, driving his troops to the limit, if necessary, by force.
С его именем тоже связывают и расстрелы заложников.
He also had prisoners shot. His name stood for cruel discipline in his own ranks, for executions of officers accused of cowardice or betrayal. Trotsky and the white generals, too, were living under civil war conditions. The only victors in war are the cruel and the consistent. The Russian Civil War became one of the bloodiest of the 20th century. There was no mercy on either side, only hatred. More than 9 million people died. The White Guards shot their red prisoners. A white officer impaled. Red commissars tied to crosses and hanged. A priest tortured to death. White terror, red terror.
La terreur rouge a véritablement explosé.
The red terror spread explosively. Within a few weeks, 10 to 15,000 people were summarily executed. Sometimes the revolutionary tribunals conducted brief hearings, but often people were simply murdered without any form of trial.
Parfois tout simplement exécutés sans aucune forme de procès.
For the white propagandists, Trotsky was a mass murderer, a butcher. For the red propagandists, he was the charismatic hero in the struggle against capital and counter-revolution, a saint. Trotsky knew that the war would not be won by force of arms alone. The war was also conducted in people's minds, and this was precisely what Trotsky valued most, psychological warfare. Meticulously, the Supreme Commissar for War seized every photo opportunity, hundreds of meters of footage that were later to disappear under Stalin into secret archives and poison cabinets. For Trotsky, even the smallest details were important. He wore leather clothing, for example, because he thought that would enhance his charisma, his demonic appearance. He designed his life at the front in such a way that myths and legends grew up around him. The Civil War raged for almost a year. Its outcome was totally uncertain, but already Trotsky had his eyes on what lay beyond Russia's borders. With the help of the Red Army, we will not only defend ourselves but support the struggle of the international proletariat. At the first thunderclap of the world revolution, we must be prepared to aid our brothers in revolt. When the Great War ended, there were indeed revolutionary sparks ready to burst into flame. In Berlin, Munich, Vienna and Budapest. But they were a splash in the pan. The local uprisings were brutally extinguished. The promised fraternal assistance from Russia did not materialize.